Welcome to Happily Ever After is just the beginning. Keeping your relationship not just together, but happy, and we mean truly happy, is part art and part science. You've come to the right place. Here's your host, Leslie Dories.
As a marriage specialist, I'm often asked what makes a marriage successful. And I happily tell people things like spending quality time together regularly, being kind, treating each other with respect, actively showing love and gratitude. Now, 2 of these can actually be counted, which is helpful. The other 2 are often measured by when they aren't happening. So I think it's also helpful to share specifics about what harms marriages. Knowing what these pitfalls look like can help you and your spouse head down the happily ever after path. So to help identify a few of these behaviors, I'm joined by Thomas Fiffer. He's the former senior editor at the Good Men Project, and he's co-founder of Christmas Late Creative. So Tom, thank you for coming on the show and talking about things that people need to know about to avoid them.
Thanks for having me, Leslie. And I'm passionate about this because a lot of these things are things I wish I had known. Would have served me well in past relationships. So if we can get ahead of the game and spare people any of the heartache, then I feel like that's a good thing.
Well, that's my goal too, which is why I do the show. And you wrote a piece that appeared in the Good Men Project based on a conversation that you had with Paul Friedman of the Marriage Foundation. And it was titled The 3 Silent Destroyers of Marriage. And this was a very popular piece. It's gotten over 85,000 views. But before we get to what those destroyers are, in this article, there was an interesting use of a triangle to describe what healthy marriages need. So could you explain that image? Because that image is a really good one.
Sure. The article opened with the idea I had sort of going into marriage, my first one, that a marriage needed 3 things to survive: mutual respect, functional communication, and physical intimacy, sort of your basic idea of what makes a marriage and a good relationship tick. But if you use a triangle to symbolize marriage with each of these qualities as one of its corners, with a triangle, you need a minimum of 3 points to create an actual enclosure. So if one of those points falls apart and the lines drop, you don't have a safe enclosure for the marriage anymore. So you really do need all 3 of those things to create a safe space in which couples can relate and be intimate, and particularly be vulnerable, because the type of vulnerability with intimacy is what really strengthens the relationship. So I kind of like that image of the triangle and focusing on keeping the walls together and everything solid in order to keep your marriage safe.
Well, and that's so interesting that you mentioned the V word, vulnerability, because it's that's one of the things that everybody wants, but is terrified of doing. So it's like we want this great intimacy, but then we have to open that door to the parts of us that we don't want anybody to see. And I think that when we talk about respect and these kinds of things, it's like we don't have to be perfect. But we do have to feel safe, and I do think that that's what you're talking about in this triangle that gives this. I don't know if people know this, but a triangle is the simplest, most stable form in nature, and so it's like it's why riding a tricycle is easier than riding a bicycle, because it's like you've got that third leg, and so I think that's a really good visual to give people, and that sense of safety. So let's go ahead and move on to the destroyers, because these are the things that, like you said, are going to break, either going to break one of the corners, or it's going to break one of the walls of the triangle. And the first one that is mentioned is over-familiarity. And when I read that, I just had that thing about familiarity breeds contempt. So I'm wondering if that's where we're going with this, because is that what it is, and what how does one define overfamiliarity?
Sure. And I thought of that too, with familiarity breeds contempt, and of course John Gottman has cited contempt as the nail in the coffin for marriage or any relationship. So that's part of it. But really, what I was trying to get at with overfamiliarity is just this idea of taking things for granted, not working at the relationship anymore because it's comfortable, and you just kind of assume that you're close enough that you can kind of do things that might be a little annoying or obnoxious or whatever. And of course, we all do those things, and the subject of endless conversation in relationships. But when you start to feel entitled to do those things, because you're married or because you've known this person for such a long time, then you start to act like you have a free pass, and that's really not healthy. I don't think we can take anything for granted in life. I mean, maybe, if we're religious or spiritual, we can take God's mercy, and acceptance of us for granted. But with humans, nobody grants us anything. We earn respect in a relationship. We earn devotion. We earn attention by giving those things ourselves. And then it becomes this kind of virtuous cycle of, we're contributing to the relationship and building it and strengthening that triangle. And I also like to think that we both earn and learn. We learn how to behave in ways that sustain the relationship, and how to keep doing that. So with overfamiliarity, it's really stepping back and thinking of your partner or your spouse as a whole person, and somebody maybe you don't know everything about, and somebody that you do have to treat all the time with kindness and respect and and a good attitude.
Well, I love it because, in a lot of my work, sometimes, and my husband always knows when I'm doing this, because we'll be out in public and suddenly I'll go quiet. And he's going, "You're doing it again." I said, "What?" He says, "People watching." I said, "I know, I can't help it." I will watch how people talk to complete strangers versus how they talk to the person that they're with. And, sometimes I know it's their spouse and sometimes it's not, but it's like, the way they talk to their partners is worse than the way they're talking to complete strangers. And so I don't know if that's part of that overfamiliarity that, well, I don't have to be, use please and thank you with you because you're my partner, and, you should just know, those should be assumed. And of course, we all know what happens when we assume. But also this idea. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yes, that is part of it. It's making those assumptions, and in effect, it's letting your guard down in terms of protecting the corners and the walls of that triangle. Because you're sort of getting sloppy, if you will, or you're making these assumptions that you can act in a certain way, and that it won't have any consequences. And you're so right about, with the people watching, and we see and we hear these shocking things. You go out to a restaurant and you see the next table, man says to, presumably his wife, "You don't want the steak, you want the fish." And like, would he say that to his business colleague? Would he say that to, if there were two couples dining? Would he say that to the woman who's married to the other guy? No. So why does he say that to his wife?
Yeah, and when we start out in relationships, we don't start out this way. And and again, bringing up my husband, he and I have been together for over 36 years, and every so often I'll look at him and he'll say or do something, or I'll say and do something, and we'll look at each other like, "Who are you?" Either because
right.
either because we've never talked about it, which, I was watching, I forget, I was watching something or some rerun on television yesterday, and somebody was talking about how they had run out of things to talk about with their partner, and I'm like going, I don't even understand that, because like I said, my husband and I are like, who are you? Where did that come from? Because sometimes literally it's just not cropped up in 36 years, or we've actually grown and evolved. So how I felt 20 years ago is not my way of thinking about it today. I'm not going to say it's completely off, but hopefully I've learned something in 20 years, and that I'm not just not stuck in some kind of time warp. But this assumption that because I felt this way once, I must feel this way now, I think is
sure. I mean,
actually.
And relationships thrive when they grow.
Yeah.
So we have to keep an open mind. We have to believe that we're going to have new experiences with this person and different experiences with this person, and no, they won't all be pleasant, But if we go in maintaining those three corners, if we go in maintaining mutual respect, maintaining functional communication, and maintaining the intimacy that goes along with those, then we got a pretty good shot at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things that I want to dispel is this should not take work. I hate using the word work in the same sentence as a relationship. I think it takes paying attention, but I don't think it shouldn't take work to treat another human being, especially one I promise to love, honor, and cherish, with kindness and respect. That to me is like, why would this be work? And because I think it's like you said,
I agree with you.
Wouldn't do these things with a colleague at your office.
Right. I think work is not an appropriate word to use for it. I think it takes commitment. I think it takes dedication. I think it takes a lot of self-awareness, because you have to be aware of when you're not doing it. And certainly your partner is going to make you aware of when you're not doing it. But no, it's not work in the sense of any type of drudgery or some kind of effort that oh God, I got to be nice to this person. No, well then you probably shouldn't be in the relationship. But,
yes.
but it's a constant renewal of your commitment to be the best partner that you can be. I think that's a good way to look at it.
So this is Happily Ever After is just the beginning on webtalkradio.net. I'm Leslie Dories, and I'm talking to the Good Men Project's former senior editor and co-founder of Christmas Light Creative, Thomas Fiffer, about 3 things that can destroy your marriage. And if you have some concerns about your relationship, believe me, you're not alone. But knowing what will help it to thrive or what will cause it harm are things that everyone needs to know. But there is no official Relationship 101 class where it's taught. That doesn't mean there aren't avenues available for you to learn. So if you want to know what works and what doesn't, I invite you to schedule a free, no-obligation, 5-star relationship consultation with me. You can reach me by phone at area code 919-924-0463. Again, that's 919-924-0463, or you can send me an email at Leslie, Lesli, at foundationscoachingnc.com. That's FOUNDATIONS, coaching, N as in Nancy, C as in Charlie.com. And now I want to get back to the other 2 destroyers of relationships. So, Tom, you said that the next silent killer is poor communication skills. And, and I get this all the time. People come in and they say, well, we don't communicate. And in my head, I'm going, yes, you do. You just don't like what's being communicated. But,
right.
So what do you, because, we can't not communicate. I suppose when we're sleeping, we're not communicating, but that's about the only time. So what do you mean by poor communication skills?
Sure. And just before we touch on it, I do want to emphasize the idea that these destroyers are silent. They're things that creep in to a relationship. They're things that a lot of people are not aware of when they're happening. So as we discuss these things, we're trying to put a lens on behaviors. I mean, obviously, infidelity, okay, that's in somebody's face, but these are things that quietly become part of the fabric of a relationship and then actually start to tear that fabric apart. I just wanted to make that point. So poor communication skills, communication is so central to any relationship. And it also brings it back to self-awareness, because we're often not aware of how we communicate. We're not aware of how we sound. We're not aware of what we don't say. We're not aware of our body language. We're not aware that we're constantly perhaps rejecting bids for attention from our partner, because we don't even recognize what our partner is presenting to us as a bid for attention or affection. But I think what this comes down to is that marital communication when you're in a relationship that you are fully committed to, and as you said, when you stand up on that altar, I promise to love, to cherish, till death do us part. Marital communication is really different from any other kind of communication. I think for two reasons. One, because it operates with the assumption that you're not leaving, that you're not walking away. So it has to come to some type of resolution. It has to come to some type of coming together over whatever the thing is that you're talking about, because you can't just easily walk away. And the second thing about marital communication is it is about more than just getting your needs met, negotiating with the other person about what you want or what has to be done or this and that. To me, it is a way of relating that enables two people to open their hearts to each other. And that can be hard to do. We were talking about vulnerability in the beginning, but ultimately there is a safety in that vulnerability. There's a safety in knowing that you can open your heart to this person, in knowing that you're going to be met with respect, and knowing that you're going to be met with attention and devotion and the things that help the relationship to thrive. So communication is something married people really need to work on all the time. And you really, 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 I can't emphasize this enough, need to listen to and absorb and take into account the feedback that you get from your partner on how you communicate and how it affects them.
Well, and that's such an interesting, not perspective, but point, because, one of the things that I tell people is like, when we first start to talk, everybody is hanging on our words. We're, however old we are, a year old or 9 months or 18 months or whatever, and everybody's hanging on our every word, trying to figure out what it is we're saying to them. And so I think that kind of gives us this idea that, well, everybody wants to hang on my every word, and everybody's going to want to put in effort to figure out what it is I'm saying. But as a baby, I don't have any ownership in that. But as an adult, I certainly do. I have a responsibility to try to communicate in the most effective way possible. But we're never taught that. How do we learn how, because you're talking about, opening up and the idea that there's an assumption, and again, be very careful, people. There's an assumption that because I'm married, you're not going to leave. Now, you can leave, and I'm not going to say it's going to be easy for you to leave, but I think what you're talking about, maybe tell me if I'm on the right track, is that when we develop good communication skills, regardless of what it is we're communicating, because we can communicate some hard stuff to our partners. But if we communicate well, we decrease the chance that somebody is going to leave. Right? Is that
yes,
kind of,
yes, that's absolutely right. And when we communicate well, we are always working towards resolution. We don't have to agree, but we're working towards resolution in the context of we're going to be in this same room, in this same house, in the same bed or whatever next week, next year. So it becomes pivotal to resolve these things. Otherwise, you have a blanket and you just keep, burning holes in it, and eventually there's nothing left.
Well, I mean, and this is one of those things because, and I don't, it's been a long time since I've told this story on the show, but I had a friend, well, she's still a friend, but she was relating this story about her husband saying, coming to her and saying, there's this thing that you do that really makes me crazy. And she's like, and he described what it was, and she was like, I'm not seeing it. She didn't tell him no, right? And so she says to him, the next time that happens, let me know. And so about 3 weeks later, he goes, that right there. And she was able to hear and accept, and even though she still wasn't quite sure, and she said, I don't know how to do it differently, and she asked him for some help, some suggestions, and he gave them to her. And I'm like going, oh my God, I wish I'd had this on video camera so that I could have sent it out to everybody, because I'm like going, oh my God, because it was something, it wasn't the communication was positive, but the event wasn't positive. It was something that was annoying to him. And he felt safe enough to bring it up. And there's no way but in a lot of cases, I think people are terrified to bring up stuff that their partner may be doing. Everybody automatically assumes it's conflict. It's like, only if you make it that. It doesn't have to be conflict, but if you think it's going to be conflict, then you're going to bring to the table this attitude of, okay, we're going to have this knockdown, drag out, when it's not really necessary.
Absolutely, and that that comes back to the mutual respect. So he's bringing this up in a respectful way and not saying, God, I hate it when you do that. But hey, listen, when you do this thing that you may not even be aware of, it drives me nuts. And then she came back respectfully and said, okay, well, I don't really see that I'm doing that, or I'm not aware of it, so point it out to me. Right. And that's a great example of really, really healthy relationship communication and working towards a resolution. And then, her being able to accept suggestions as to, how to stop doing that or avoid doing that is just great. Another example of this is just, choosing our words and how we talk to people. So, if you take an example of somebody, ordering takeout, which of course a lot of people are doing now during the pandemic, so one person says, well, well, actually, two parts to this. So first of all, in my first marriage, my ex would say something like, do you want Chinese? And it took me years to figure out that what she was saying was, I want Chinese.
Right.
It wasn't a question.
Right.
So first of all, understanding how people communicate, and this is also, it's particularly true with women who are not always as assertive as men about, saying what they want. And so that was sort of one interesting communication example. It took me a little while to learn, her way of speaking. But let's say you have a couple and, say the guy says, let's order Chinese food tonight. And the wife says, I hate Chinese food. Now that's really poor communication. I mean, she can say, hey, Chinese isn't really my favorite. We could order Thai, or she could say, you know what, you go ahead and order Chinese. I know you love it, and I'll get something else. But to immediately set the stage for conflict, like you bad person, don't you know that I don't like, that's sort of the inverse of what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So, and the last silent killer that you identify is what you call having a transactional attitude. So what exactly is that, and what kind of problems does it create?
Well, that is something that also, I think, creeps into relationships. It creeps in when people's needs are not being met, and the fact that those needs aren't being met is in large part due to the fact that people are not communicating those needs or communicating them effectively. So then we start to feel resentment, and then we start to feel, well, if I'm going to do this for her or for him, then she's going to do this for me. You know, so it becomes, you know, less about giving and more about getting, or about only giving when you're going to get something in return. And, you know, no one is suggesting that, you know, either partner become totally sacrificial and you know, codependent or people pleasing and all of that, because that's one extreme. But if you're constantly thinking about all the things that are happening in the relationship in transactional terms, and you're always like evening out the score, you know, that's a really unhealthy way to look at things, because, you know, as you know, you were saying, no one is perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. At any given time, somebody is going to be ahead or behind in that score. But if you look at it over a longer term context, you know, if you're really committed to each other and you're loving each other and you're respecting, it's all going to balance out. There are times when one person carries a bigger load. There are times when the other person carries a bigger load. Some people are better at things than others. So, and, you know, you said something before about, you know, about being patient with people and wanting to make mistakes. And the line from the article is, you know, we talk about, you know, honor when we go into marriage. And I think that means honoring our imperfections and mistakes, you know, and honoring that because we're human.
Right. Well, and it's, you know, and it's so important, because when we get into this transactional, I'll do this only if you do this other thing, which, you know, I go back to the marriage vows, and most of us didn't say, well, I'll love, honor, and cherish you as long as you love, honor, and cherish me. Now, there's an implication because both people promise that, but, you know, this is one of those things where, and this is how I believe it becomes silent, is, as you were talking about, it instead of when I'm disappointed or hurt by something, instead of coming to my partner and saying, hey, that thing that happened last Tuesday, can we talk about it? Because I'm really struggling with it, right? So then I can share what my problem with it is, and then we can work towards a solution, as opposed to, well, I'm just now going to only do what my partner does for me. And this is what happens when a lot of people come into, you know, they seek help for their relationship. Usually it's just fix my partner. But I mean, I'll hear this all the time when I'm working with somebody, because you know, Dr. Phil says, you know, somebody has to step up and be the hero in the relationship. Somebody has to go first. And, you know, I'll get this, well, why do I have to do this? And, you know, and my first response is, because that's what works. But then it's like, well, but my partner isn't doing it. And it's kind of like, so when you were a little kid, and, you know, did your parents ever accept that it was okay for you to hit the other kid because the kid hit you for, I mean, you know, it's like, we wouldn't accept this in any other aspect of our lives, but we do in this most unique and what can be the most, wonderful relationship.
Yes. I like what you said about the vows, you know, and if you think about it, yes, each person is making the vow, but the vows are not conditional on the other person's keeping the vow in that sense. You know, we're making them unilaterally. We're saying, I promise to do this. And the other person is saying, I promise to do this too. It's not the minister or the rabbi up there saying, you know, okay, you know, you do it if he does it, or she, you know. So,
right.
So that's the beauty of it, is that it's, you know, it's really a pledge. And when it goes the other way, you know, you were mentioning, you know, somebody saying, well, I'll do this if you do this, and I don't know if you'd call this a fourth silent destroyer, but it's something that I really get exercised about when I have friends who tell me that this is happening, or I hear that it's happening in a relationship, and that's the proof of love. You know, if you love me, you will ... And, you know, that is just Because think about how it starts.
Yeah.
If you love me.
Right.
It doesn't start from the context of we love each other.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, and we can, and the thing that I tell people is we can make requests for changes of behavior, like my friend's husband. He was making a request for a change in behavior. And what I tell my clients is say yes to those requests as often as you can, because sometimes you do have to say no. And saying no is okay, right? I joke, I'm an introvert, and there is not enough alcohol in the world to get me on a karaoke stage. I will be under the table. So that's not anything that appeals to me. Luckily, my husband's also an introvert, but if he weren't, it's like, fine, you go out with your friends and have a good time, or I'll go, but don't ask me to get up there, because that's not who I am, and it won't happen anyway. But we can
right.
we can say no, but we need to do it in a loving and gentle way. But if we've already primed the pump with a lot of yeses, then when we say no, it's not going to ding the relationship that much, and it doesn't turn into this transactional thing of, well, I did this for you, so you need to do this other thing for me.
Right. That's just a recipe for constant disappointment.
Yeah. So what suggestions do you have for helping people to avoid these things? We've now defined them, but it's like you said, that sometimes they just kind of creep up on couples silently, and like you said, they kind of happen gradually. It's not like an affair where somebody finds out about an affair and somebody's just thrown a grenade into the middle of the relationship. These things just kind of eat away at it. I call it like the Chinese water torture.
Right. Well, I think certainly self-awareness is one. Listening to the feedback from your partner, because more often than not, in whatever way someone communicates it, could be healthy assertive communication, could be angry communication, could be passive aggressive communication, but somebody is going to be communicating their displeasure with what's happening because it's not making them happy. So really, really listen to that. So self-awareness, listening, and then making a conscious choice to do something about it. So often we're on autopilot, and a lot of these ways of relating and ways of talking to people or moving into transactional mode, it feels very natural. It's, we don't think about it. It's just kind of happening, and that's when we're really not using our thinking brain to serve us and to maximum effect. So making a conscious choice, we're not going to call it work, but a conscious choice to act in a different way, and then to reap the benefits of doing that, because it happens almost immediately. And the other suggestion would be, if things aren't working in your relationship, don't start by blaming your partner. Don't start by beating yourself up totally either.
Right.
But start looking under the surface. Start looking at the little day-to-day interactions, the things that a great marriage or relationship are built on, because those positive interactions keep making it better and better and stronger, because, like a tsunami, it's under the surface. You don't see it until suddenly, wham, what happened there? Well, I thought we were good,
Right.
And now we have all these problems. So awareness, listening, conscious choices, commitment, and always looking under the surface to see what you can do better.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, for being on the show. Can you let people know where they can get, learn more about your perspective, your suggestions?
Sure. Thank you. So I do have a little book, which is a collection of my Good Men Project articles on what I call dysfunctional relationships. The book is called Why It Can't Work: Detaching from Dysfunctional Relationships, to make room for true love. And in the context of marriage, I would say this is about really sort of evaluating whether the relationship that you're in, let's say you're not married to this person or yet, is one that has the potential to develop into something where you're in that triangle, and there are ways to evaluate that. So the book, many people have found it helpful, and you can find that on Amazon. And I'm also an editor and a publisher, and you can find information about that at my company, Christmas Lake Creative, christmaslakecreative.com, where there's information about various options for writing, book coaching, and also publishing.
Perfect. So in order to arrive at your destination safely, you need to know where you're going, what's going to get you there, and what obstacles might send you off course. And your marriage is absolutely no different. Giving it over to love is great in theory, but a good marriage takes more than just love. So the question is, are you willing to start doing what works and nip the harmful things in the bud? I hope you are, and I hope one of the ways that you'll do that is to keep listening to this show. And until next week, stay loving.